I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
There was no warning, no gradual retreat, and no carefully prepared palace statement. Catherine made the decision in a private meeting, placed the signed cancellation notice on the table, and changed the balance of the royal household in a single moment. Camilla had expected resistance. She had not expected this, because Catherine was not merely challenging an arrangement, she was ending it completely, and the reason was tied to words Diana had hidden decades earlier. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine held steady as two senior household aides waited across from her. The royal family heritage arrangement, a private household agreement giving Camilla a consultative role over selected belongings, correspondence, and commemorative material linked to Diana, had been designed to prevent old wounds becoming new disputes. Now that protection had become conflict. She finished reading the cancellation notice aloud, signed the final page, and placed her pen beside Diana's hidden letter. William watched carefully. He did not interrupt, because he already understood why she had reached this point. Camilla received the decision minutes later and asked whether the arrangement had merely been suspended. It had been cancelled outright. Her authority over decisions involving Diana's private legacy was finished immediately. She repeated the word cancelled, as though saying it twice might change its meaning, then fell silent. For her, this was not simply lost access. It touched the most painful questions surrounding her place in the family, whether acceptance in the present could ever overcome the shadow of the past. Charles felt that collision at once. The king asked Catherine privately whether any compromise remained possible, knowing that protecting his wife could reopen wounds with his son and daughter-in-law. She told him the letter had changed what she could morally accept. Diana had written not merely about possessions, but about who should protect the meaning of her private legacy when William eventually built a family of his own. Catherine would not disclose every line, yet one passage had convinced her that continuing Camilla's role crossed a boundary she could no longer defend. William's silence now carried its own revelation. Catherine had not acted impulsively, and Camilla soon learned why. The prince had already read the letter and knew exactly what his wife intended before the cancellation was signed. That knowledge transformed the shock. This was no sudden rebellion Catherine had launched alone. It was a decision William had allowed to happen with open eyes. And once Camilla understood that William had known before she did, the cancellation stopped feeling like a disagreement and began feeling like something far more personal. The cancelled arrangement was written on paper, but the real conflict had never lived on paper at all. It lived inside a family shaped by memory, loyalty, grief, and the impossible shadow of Diana. Catherine had entered that history years after its most painful chapters. Camilla had lived through them. William had inherited them. And now, with one forgotten letter returning to the center of royal life, each of them was being forced to choose what loyalty actually meant. Catherine felt no triumph after the cancellation. She had never known Diana, yet marrying William had slowly made the princess's memory part of her duty as the mother of George, Charlotte, and Louis. Those children were not inheriting only titles and traditions. They were inheriting stories about a grandmother they would never meet. That was why the hidden letter mattered. It was not old correspondence. It was a private family message carrying instructions across generations. William found Catherine alone after the decision and understood that she was shaken. She admitted that seeing his mother's handwriting had made the issue intimate. He sat beside her and stayed silent until she finished. Catherine told him she knew Camilla would be hurt, and that knowledge weighed on her. But ignoring Diana's request, she said, would have felt like a betrayal of someone who had trusted the future without knowing who would eventually stand inside it. Camilla carried a wound. She told Charles that she could survive dislike, criticism, hostility, but she could not accept decades of service being treated as disposable whenever Diana's name returned. For the queen consort, the title used here for the king's wife, the cancelled arrangement had represented more than influence. It had been proof that the royal household had accepted her place within it. Losing that role reopened the fear that some rooms of family memory would remain closed to her. William shared the sentence that had unsettled him most. In the letter, Diana referred to the woman who would one day help raise his children, asking that she understand the difference between preserving memory and reshaping it. Catherine heard those words differently now. The issue was no longer jewels, files, or ceremonial choices. It was about who would shape what George, Charlotte, and Louis came to believe about the grandmother whose absence still defined part of their father's life. That realization changed everything, because the letter alone had not caused the cancellation. Months earlier, one tense family gathering had given Diana's warning a meaning. To understand why Catherine acted so decisively, the story must return to the single royal gathering that turned an uncomfortable arrangement into a line she was no longer willing to cross. Months before the cancellation, nothing appeared broken. Catherine remained courteous. Camilla remained confident. Charles believed the family had finally learned how to live beside its old wounds without reopening them. Then came one private gathering at Sandringham. A conversation that should have lasted seconds stretched into something colder. William noticed it. Catherine remembered every word. And when Diana's hidden letter surfaced later, that forgotten exchange suddenly looked less like an awkward misunderstanding and more like the beginning of everything. Catherine had originally supported the heritage arrangement because she believed shared consultation might prevent old tensions from turning into fresh battles. The agreement governed how Diana-related possessions, private correspondence, anniversary material, and ceremonial references could be handled when different royal households were involved. In simple terms, it was meant to stop one side of the family making emotionally sensitive decisions alone. At first, that sounded reasonable to her. It promised cooperation. More importantly, it seemed to protect William from repeatedly being dragged into disputes over his mother. Camilla changed the mood during a private Sandringham family heritage meeting, when she suggested that future presentations of Diana's legacy should be carefully integrated into the story of the present monarchy rather than treated separately. Catherine set down her teacup and looked directly at her. "Integrated by whom?" she asked. William immediately turned toward his wife. Charles understood at once that the discussion had crossed from procedure into something personal, and the king tried to soften the tension before it hardened. Camilla insisted that she meant balance, not erasure. She argued that separating Diana forever from the monarchy she had once served risked turning every commemoration into a competing version of history. Catherine accepted the explanation in the room, but she did not forget it. The concern followed her because the arrangement did more than organize access. It gave people power to shape meaning, and that suddenly felt far more dangerous. William spoke quietly with Catherine later, and admitted he had spent much of his life watching other people decide how his mother should be remembered. The prince did not sound furious. That was what made the admission hurt more. He sounded tired. Catherine understood then that any system created to protect him could become another mechanism through which his memories were managed by someone else. Weeks later, an archived box transferred during a household inventory produced Diana's sealed handwritten letter. A household inventory simply meant the formal checking and recording of stored family material before it was moved or reassigned. Catherine read the passage asking that William's future family guard her memory against becoming convenient, softened, or rewritten. Suddenly, Sandringham no longer felt like a misunderstanding. The letter gave Catherine certainty, but certainty did not make the next step easier. It merely made avoiding Camilla impossible. Catherine could have sent an aide. She could have allowed William to speak for her. She could even have cancelled the arrangement without explanation. Instead, she requested a private meeting with Camilla and carried Diana's letter into the room herself. No advisors sat between them. No official language softened the purpose. For several tense minutes, neither woman raised her voice. They did not need to, because Catherine was about to explain why a dead woman's words had changed what she could tolerate from the living. Catherine began carefully, making one thing clear before anything else could be twisted. This was not an attempt to remove Camilla from royal life, nor was it a challenge to her place beside Charles. The dispute concerned Diana's personal legacy alone. For Catherine, that distinction mattered, because private correspondence and family memories were not simply royal assets. They carried grief, identity, and meaning for William and his children in ways that no ceremonial agreement could fully contain. Camilla answered with controlled frustration. She reminded Catherine that the arrangement had been created to stop competing sides of the family from claiming ownership over the past. To her, shared consultation had been protection against emotional chaos. Then Catherine slid a copied passage from Diana's letter across the table. The Queen Consort read it in silence, paused, and slowly pushed the page back. She did not reach for the rest. Camilla finally asked the question beneath every argument. Did Catherine truly believe she had tried to erase Diana? Catherine chose her words with painful care. She said intention was no longer the only issue. Control itself had become the problem. Once anyone could shape how Diana's private words were presented, softened, or interpreted, the boundary between preserving memory and rewriting it became dangerously thin. Camilla's anger weakened into something more exposed. She admitted that she had spent years learning to live beside a memory she could never defeat and never escape. Catherine listened, but she did not retreat. She explained that Diana had specifically asked for William's future household to protect the emotional meaning of her private correspondence. A household, in this context, meant the trusted staff and family structure supporting a senior royal's personal duties and private affairs. The request did not name the spouse of a future sovereign. It pointed toward William's own family. Camilla understood the implication immediately. Catherine was not presenting this as preference. She believed she was fulfilling Diana's direct request from years before William had even met her. Then Camilla gave the warning neither woman could ignore. Cancel the arrangement, and Charles would have to decide whether Diana's wishes could overrule authority already exercised in his name. That warning lands exactly where Catherine knew it would. Because the next battle is no longer between two women, but between memory and royal authority itself. Charles expected an emotional dispute. What reached his desk instead was something far more difficult. A completed decision backed by William and rooted in authority Catherine already possessed. The king could object, he could pressure, he could plead for compromise. But reversing the cancellation would mean publicly overruling his son's household over Diana's private legacy. For a monarch accustomed to hierarchy, it was an uncomfortable discovery. The crown gave him enormous authority, but not every form of control. Charles read Catherine's written withdrawal twice, removed his glasses, and placed the document face down. The heritage arrangement operated by consent between the relevant royal households, meaning each family branch had to remain willing for the agreement to continue. It was not a permanent command from the sovereign. An aide asked whether a response should be drafted. The king did not look up. Not yet, he said, because ordering Catherine back into the arrangement could create a larger rupture than the cancellation itself. Charles felt Camilla's pain very deeply. He knew the Queen Consort had viewed the arrangement as proof that she was trusted inside a history that had once rejected her. Yet William's position carried a different weight. Diana's private family materials had passed into arrangements connected directly with her sons, rather than becoming unrestricted property of the monarch. That mattered because overriding his son would not simply defend his wife. It could reopen injuries between father and son that years of restraint had barely contained. William removed any remaining uncertainty in private later that day. The prince told him plainly that he supported Catherine's cancellation and would not ask her to reverse it. He then revealed, through the original written instructions kept with Diana's sealed correspondence, why the letter had remained unopened. His mother had directed that it reach him only if questions over her legacy became a source of division inside the family he would one day build. Charles absorbed that detail in silence. The revelation changed the argument because Catherine was no longer acting only from emotion, and William was not merely defending his wife. Both believed they were responding to a condition Diana herself had anticipated. The king could still apply pressure, but doing so would mean challenging the circumstances under which the letter had been preserved. Charles finally chose restraint. He issued no order reversing Catherine, made no demand of William, and allowed the cancellation to stand. That silence carried consequences immediately. Before the afternoon ended, Palace staff began removing Camilla from briefings connected to Diana's private legacy. By refusing to stop Catherine, Charles avoids one confrontation and accidentally triggers another, because the royal household now has to make the cancellation real. Decisions inside royal households rarely become real all at once. They become real through small changes. A name removed from a briefing, an invitation altered, a folder redirected, a meeting that disappears from a diary. For Camilla, that was what made the fallout so painful. There was no dramatic announcement declaring that her influence had ended. Instead, piece by piece, she watched an arrangement she believed was secure vanish from around her, until one ordinary message made the new reality impossible to deny. Camilla received the revised instructions before noon. Household staff had been told that future requests involving Diana's private letters, selected personal belongings, or commemorative family material must now go directly through William and Catherine's household. In this context, a royal household means the personal staff and administrative structure supporting a senior member of the family. The change did not strip the queen consort of her own duties or authority. It applied only to the cancelled arrangements surrounding Diana's legacy. That narrow distinction mattered legally and emotionally, but it did little to soften the blow. Camilla's private secretary entered with a revised briefing schedule and quietly placed it before her. One heritage meeting had disappeared. She asked whether it had been postponed. The aide hesitated, then answered that she was no longer required to attend. For several seconds, the queen consort said nothing. Only after the secretary left did she allow the frustration to surface. Losing one meeting was not the wound. The absence represented something larger, a part of family history from which she had now been formally removed. Charles found Camilla later and tried to explain why intervention would make everything worse. The king told her that forcing Catherine back into the arrangement could damage William's trust and turn a private dispute into a permanent family fracture. She listened, then answered with quiet bitterness that neutrality looked very different from her side of the door. To him, restraint protected the family. To her, it felt like being left alone with the consequences. Catherine moved quickly to prevent the letter becoming another source of palace struggle. She ordered Diana's original correspondence returned to William's private family archive, rather than allowing further copies to circulate. A private family archive simply means a restricted collection of personal papers preserved for relatives rather than general household use. Her decision was meant to end speculation, but before the letter was secured, William read it once more. William stopped at the final handwritten line. Catherine had deliberately avoided mentioning it during her confrontation with Camilla. Diana's words carried no demand for revenge. Instead, they warned him never to let protecting her memory become an excuse for cruelty toward another person. Catherine made the decision, but Diana's final sentence now pushes William toward something harder than cancellation: compassion without surrender. William does not summon advisors. He does not ask Charles to mediate. He requests 15 minutes alone with Camilla and arrives carrying nothing, not the letter, not the cancelled agreement, not even notes. For once, there is no institution standing between them. Only a son protecting his mother's memory and a woman who has spent decades living beside that memory. What follows does not restore the old arrangement, but it changes something far more important than paperwork: the meaning each attaches to the other's actions. William makes the boundary clear before Camilla can mistake the meeting for negotiation. Catherine's cancellation will stand. The prince tells her that Diana's letter belongs emotionally to his childhood, but its deeper purpose concerns the next generation. He refuses to let George, Charlotte, and Louis inherit bitterness disguised as loyalty. That matters because family memory can either protect children from old wounds or quietly teach them to carry those wounds forward. Camilla listens without interrupting until William shares the final handwritten sentence from his mother's letter. With no aides present, he explains that Diana asked him never to let preserving her memory become an excuse for cruelty toward another person. The queen consort's defensiveness breaks. She admits that losing the arrangement made her feel as though the family had finally decided she could never escape the worst chapter of her life. William answers with equal honesty. Protecting Diana, he says, does not require humiliating Camilla, but kindness does not require giving her influence over how his mother is remembered. He then reveals, through this private conversation, that Catherine deliberately withheld Diana's final sentence during their confrontation because she feared compassion might be mistaken for permission to keep the old arrangement alive. Camilla absorbs that truth slowly. The future king offers a new boundary. She will hold no formal authority over Diana's private legacy, yet she will not be excluded from family commemorations simply because the past remains painful. A family commemoration means a private or public occasion marking a person's life, service, or memory. The distinction is careful but decisive. She loses control, not dignity. For the first time, both understand that reconciliation will not mean agreement. It will mean accepting a painful limit without turning that limit into another punishment for the family ever again. William leaves knowing nothing has been erased. Camilla remains hurt. Catherine's decision remains intact, and Diana's memory remains protected without becoming a weapon. Yet their private understanding barely settles before news of the cancellation reaches the outside world. Inside the palace, a boundary has finally been understood. Outside it, the public is about to turn that boundary into a battle over Diana, Camilla, and Catherine. By morning, the private argument belongs to everyone. Catherine's cancellation is stripped of its quiet conversations and transformed into headlines, broadcasts, commentary, and furious debate. To some, she has defended Diana with extraordinary loyalty. To others, Camilla has been publicly dragged back into a past she can never rewrite. Yet beneath the noise, one striking reality emerges. The public is not reacting merely to a royal arrangement. It is reacting to wounds Britain thought the monarchy had already survived. Catherine refuses to let the letter itself become public property. Palace communications confirm only that an internal family heritage arrangement has ended, and that responsibility for Diana-related private material now rests with William's household. A palace communication is simply an official message issued on behalf of the royal family to explain a development without exposing private detail. That distinction matters, because releasing Diana's full words would destroy the very privacy Catherine says she is trying to protect. Britain reacts anyway. One fictional morning newspaper appears with the front-page headline, "Diana's Words, Catherine's Decision," linking the cancellation directly to the late princess and triggering an immediate rush of photographers outside Kensington Palace. The phrase spreads across television discussions within hours. Catherine watches part of the coverage beside William before switching it off. She tells him quietly that she never wanted his mother's words turned into a weapon against Camilla. Camilla feels the impact from the opposite side. Commentators begin describing the cancellation as proof that she has been rejected from a part of royal history forever. The Queen Consort hears a narrow dispute over Diana's private legacy turned into a judgment on her entire life, and the transformation unsettles her deeply. What Catherine intended as a boundary is now being interpreted publicly as a verdict. William decides the silence has gone too far. Through an authorized palace clarification, the prince states that the cancellation concerns stewardship, not punishment. Stewardship means the responsibility to protect and manage something without claiming ownership over its meaning. The wording is deliberate. It defends Catherine's decision while also refusing to humiliate Camilla. For the first time, the future king publicly separates protection of Diana from condemnation of his stepmother. Charles reads the clarification before release and approves it personally. The king knows that doing so means accepting the new boundary in public, even though it has caused pain inside his marriage. His approval closes one dangerous door. The family will not allow the dispute to become open warfare. The noise eventually fades, leaving Catherine, Camilla, William, and Charles with something the newspapers cannot decide for them: how they will live together after the line has been drawn. In the end, Catherine does not restore the arrangement. Camilla does not ask her to. Charles does not attempt to overturn the decision, and William does not allow Diana's letter to become ammunition for another generation of royal warfare. That is what makes the final outcome so unexpected. The hidden words do create a boundary. They do force painful truths into the open. But instead of breaking the family apart, they compel 4 people to acknowledge something the monarchy had avoided for years. Remembrance and reconciliation are not opposites. Catherine keeps the cancellation in place, leaving William and his household with final responsibility for decisions involving Diana's private family legacy. A narrower protocol replaces the old agreement, meaning a simple set of household rules now defines who may handle those materials and how they may be used. Broader commemorations can still involve the wider family, but Camilla no longer holds authority over Diana's personal words. The change matters because it separates participation from control, allowing remembrance without reopening the argument over ownership. Catherine later meets Camilla privately and tells her the decision was never intended to erase her. The Queen Consort answers that she understands now, even if understanding does not make the loss painless. Catherine does not dismiss that hurt. She accepts that the cancellation carried a human cost, but she refuses to treat another person's pain as proof that the boundary itself was wrong. Camilla, in turn, accepts something she had resisted for years. Belonging to the royal family does not mean possessing equal authority over every chapter of its history. William makes one final choice that defines the outcome. He keeps Diana's original letter sealed with his family's private correspondence rather than allowing it to become a public document. The prince understands that publishing it would turn guidance into ammunition and private memory into spectacle. Charles accepts that decision as well. The king recognizes that protecting Camilla cannot require his son to surrender control over his mother's memory, while she finally accepts his refusal to reverse Catherine's action. The arrangement ends, but something more destructive ends with it. The belief that honoring Diana requires another woman to be diminished. Catherine draws the boundary, Camilla accepts it, William protects his mother's memory, and Charles allows the family to move forward. The final meaning is clear. This is neither Camilla's defeat nor Diana's posthumous revenge. It is the moment remembrance is separated from rivalry, compassion from surrender, and history from control. For once, the monarchy does not survive by burying its past. It survives by giving that past its proper place. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.